What if everything you've been taught about Jesus Christ's divine powers was completely wrong? Picture this. A dying woman in Virginia Beach, 1944, gasping her final words as she witnesses something that would shake the very foundations of Christianity. "I saw him meditating by the river," she whispered, her voice barely audible. For hours, his whole body was glowing. What she had witnessed during Edgar Cayce's most controversial reading wasn't just a vision, it was a revelation that would challenge 2,000 years of religious doctrine. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. Has this ever happened to you, discovering that something you believed your entire life might not be the complete truth? That moment when everything you thought you knew suddenly shifts and you realize there's a hidden layer of reality you never imagined existed. For over 70 years, the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach has been the guardian of one of history's most extraordinary secrets. Locked away in their archives are over 14,000 documented psychic readings that Edgar Cayce conducted while in deep trance states. These aren't just random spiritual musings, they're detailed, specific accounts that claim to reveal the most revolutionary truth about Jesus Christ ever recorded. What you're about to discover might surprise you, because according to these meticulously documented readings, Jesus wasn't born with supernatural abilities. The Christ consciousness, the miraculous healings, the profound spiritual wisdom that transformed humanity, none of it was a divine birthright. Instead, Cayce's readings reveal that Jesus developed these extraordinary powers through 18 years of intensive meditation training that took him from the sacred temples of ancient Egypt to the hidden monasteries of India. Think about the implications for a moment. If this is true, it means that the same spiritual practices Jesus used to achieve Christ consciousness are not only available to us today, they're accessible to anyone willing to commit to the same disciplined path of meditation and spiritual development that he followed. Stay with me until the end, because what we're about to explore together will revolutionize your understanding of not just Jesus's true spiritual journey, but your own potential for divine consciousness. We're going to dive deep into the specific meditation techniques that Cayce claimed Jesus practiced daily, the ancient wisdom he absorbed from Egyptian priests and Eastern masters, and most importantly, how these same practices are being used by modern spiritual seekers to achieve remarkable transformations in their own lives. The dying woman's vision of Jesus, meditating by the river, his body radiating divine light, wasn't just a mystical experience, it was a glimpse into the systematic spiritual practices that transformed an ordinary man into the greatest spiritual teacher in human history. And according to Edgar Cayce's documented readings, this transformation process isn't reserved for one chosen individual. For those who resonate with this content, subscribing means you'll never miss these profound discoveries. I'm constantly uncovering teachings that can genuinely change how you experience life. It's here that Edgar Cayce's revelations become truly extraordinary. While accessing what he called the Akashic Records, described as the cosmic library containing the complete spiritual history of every soul, Cayce unveiled the hidden truth behind Jesus's transformation. These weren't mystical fantasies or religious interpretations, but detailed accounts of specific practices, locations, and teachers that shaped the consciousness of history's most influential spiritual figure. The journey began when Jesus was just 12 years old. For 18 years, he embarked on what can only be described as the most comprehensive spiritual education ever undertaken by a human being. This wasn't the sheltered life in Nazareth that traditional Christianity presents. Instead, Jesus traveled extensively, seeking out the greatest spiritual masters of his time across different continents and cultures. Picture the mindset required for such a commitment. an ordinary young man making the profound decision to dedicate nearly 2 decades of his life to understanding the deepest mysteries of human consciousness. He studied in the sacred temples of Egypt, where ancient priests had preserved meditation techniques passed down through millennia. These weren't simple prayers or rituals. They were sophisticated practices designed to synchronize human consciousness with cosmic rhythms. But the transformation didn't happen overnight. According to Cayce's detailed readings, Jesus then journeyed to India, where Buddhist and Hindu masters taught him advanced meditation techniques that had been refined over centuries. Each location, each teacher, each practice added another layer to his spiritual development. The impact of this systematic approach to consciousness expansion would eventually revolutionize how humanity understood its relationship with the divine. What makes these revelations particularly fascinating is how they reveal the behind-the-scenes reality of spiritual mastery. Jesus wasn't born enlightened. He earned it through disciplined practice. Every morning, before dawn, he would engage in what the ancient Egyptians called the silence. This wasn't ordinary meditation as we might understand it today. Witnesses described seeing his physical body literally emanating light during these sessions, as if his consciousness had become so aligned with universal energy that it manifested as visible illumination. This daily practice became the cornerstone of everything that followed: the healings, the profound teachings, the miracles that would inspire billions. All of it emerged from this consistent, methodical approach to spiritual development. It's a testament to the power of sustained inner work and the incredible potential that lies dormant within human consciousness. The hidden truth behind Jesus' spiritual mastery becomes even more remarkable when we examine the sheer scope of his educational journey. Between the ages of 12 and 30, he essentially became the ultimate spiritual nomad, traveling thousands of miles to study with masters who possessed ancient wisdom that had been carefully preserved for generations. This wasn't the story of divine inspiration striking like lightning. This was methodical, intentional transformation through dedicated learning. Think about the mindset shift this requires in how we understand spiritual development. While traditional Christianity presents Jesus as inherently divine, Cayce's revelations show us a young man making conscious decisions to seek out the most advanced spiritual teachers of his time. He understood that true mastery required learning from multiple sources, different cultures, and varied approaches to consciousness expansion. In the sacred temples of Egypt, Jesus encountered priests who had mastered something extraordinary: the ability to synchronize human physiology with cosmic energy patterns. These weren't abstract philosophical concepts, but practical techniques that created measurable changes in the body's energy systems. The Egyptian masters taught him breath control methods so sophisticated that they could literally align his heartbeat with universal rhythms. Imagine the impact of such training. Your physical body becoming a perfectly tuned instrument, resonating with the same frequencies that govern planetary movements and cosmic cycles. This wasn't mystical theory. It was applied science that the ancient Egyptians had perfected over thousands of years. But Jesus didn't stop there. He took these temple teachings and adapted them to his own circumstances, developing what would become one of his most powerful practices: desert walking meditation. Picture this: walking for miles through the harsh landscape, maintaining perfect awareness of breath and divine presence simultaneously. This moving meditation represented a breakthrough in spiritual practice, integrating contemplative awareness with physical activity in ways that amplified both. The genius behind this approach becomes clear when you realize how it prepared him for his later ministry. Walking meditation taught him to maintain spiritual consciousness while actively engaged with the physical world. It was training for a life where every step, every interaction, every moment would become an opportunity to express divine consciousness. This combination of Egyptian temple wisdom and desert practice created something entirely new, a form of spirituality that was both deeply mystical and intensely practical. Jesus was developing the ability to access transcendent states of consciousness while remaining fully present and functional in everyday reality. What's fascinating is how these ancient techniques align with modern discoveries about the connection between breath, heart rhythm, and consciousness states. Current research validates what these Egyptian priests understood millennia ago about the relationship between controlled breathing and expanded awareness. But the most profound aspect of Jesus' training was still ahead of him, hidden in the monasteries of the East, where he would encounter practices that would completely revolutionize his understanding of human potential. It was in the monasteries of India where Jesus encountered the most transformative teachings of his entire spiritual journey. The Buddhist and Hindu masters he studied with possessed advanced meditation techniques that went far beyond anything he had learned in Egypt. These weren't just practices for achieving peace or clarity. They were systematic methods for completely reconstructing human consciousness at its most fundamental level. A simple like means the world and helps these profound teachings reach others who are ready to discover what's really possible through spiritual practice. The hidden truth behind Jesus' miraculous abilities lies in understanding what these Eastern masters taught him about the nature of personal identity itself. They introduced him to a practice so radical, so transformative, that it would become the cornerstone of everything he later accomplished. They called it ego death, the systematic dissolution of personal identity through deep meditation. Think about the courage required to embrace such a practice. Most people spend their entire lives building up their sense of self, strengthening their personal identity, protecting their ego from any perceived threats. But Jesus made the revolutionary decision to do the exact opposite, to methodically dismantle the very foundations of his individual self. This wasn't a one-time mystical experience or a dramatic spiritual breakthrough. According to Cayce's detailed revelations, Jesus practiced what he called the conscious crucifixion of the ego every single morning before dawn. Picture this daily ritual. While the world slept, he would sit in complete stillness and systematically release every personal desire, every fear, every attachment to outcomes. The impact of this practice was profound beyond imagination. By deliberately dissolving the barriers between his human consciousness and divine consciousness, Jesus created a clear channel through which universal love and wisdom could flow without resistance. This wasn't about suppressing or denying his humanity. It was about transforming it into something that could serve as a perfect vehicle for divine expression. Behind the scenes of his later ministry, this morning practice was the hidden foundation that made everything else possible. The healings, the profound teachings, the miracles that defied natural laws, all emerged from this daily act of conscious surrender. Each morning, Jesus would literally die to his separate self and be reborn as an expression of cosmic consciousness. What makes this revelation so significant is how it demystifies the entire process of spiritual transformation. These weren't supernatural powers granted to one chosen individual. They were the natural result of specific practices that systematically aligned human will with divine will. The Eastern masters had shown Jesus something that would revolutionize spiritual understanding forever, that the greatest barrier to experiencing our true divine nature isn't external circumstances or lack of knowledge, but the very sense of separate self that we cling to so desperately. The breakthrough moment came when Cayce revealed the exact four-step process that Jesus used in his daily meditation practice. This wasn't vague spiritual guidance. These were precise, systematic instructions that anyone could follow. The first step involved achieving complete physical stillness while focusing entirely on the breath entering and leaving the nostrils. This sounds simple, but it required the kind of disciplined attention that most people never develop. The second step demanded mental surrender of all personal concerns and ambitions. Imagine the mindset shift required here, consciously releasing every worry, every plan, every desire for personal gain. This wasn't passive resignation, but active choice to clear mental space for something greater to emerge. The third step opened the heart center to receive divine love and wisdom. Jesus had learned to transform his heart from a source of personal desires into a receiving station for cosmic consciousness. The impact of this heart opening was so profound that it fundamentally altered his entire energetic signature. The fourth and final step allowed that divine consciousness to direct every word and action throughout the day. This meant living from a completely different operating system, one where personal will had been replaced by universal intelligence as the primary decision-making force. What makes these revelations so compelling is how they explain the seemingly impossible. The miraculous results that witnesses described weren't supernatural anomalies. They were natural consequences of perfect alignment with cosmic consciousness. Jesus's healing abilities, his profound wisdom, his capacity to transform lives with a single interaction, all emerged from systematic spiritual practice rather than divine birthright. The behind-the-scenes reality becomes even more fascinating when we examine the documented accounts from Bethany. Witnesses who were present during Jesus' meditation sessions reported something extraordinary. When he emerged from these deep states, people could actually feel healing energy radiating from him before he even spoke. His daily practice had literally transformed his entire being into a conduit for divine healing power. If you're drawn to these deeper spiritual truths, hit that subscribe button. We're diving deep into ancient wisdom and practical spirituality that actually transforms modern life. Picture the transformation this represents. Through consistent application of these 4 steps, Jesus had rewired his consciousness so completely that his physical presence became a healing force. His meditation practice hadn't just changed his inner experience. It had altered his very essence in ways that others could perceive and benefit from. This reveals the hidden truth about spiritual development that most people miss entirely. Real transformation isn't about accumulating spiritual knowledge or having peak experiences. It's about systematic daily practice that gradually rewrites the fundamental programming of human consciousness. The evidence suggests that Jesus' approach worked so effectively because it addressed every level of human experience simultaneously: physical stillness, mental surrender, emotional opening, and practical application. But here's where Cayce's revelations become even more remarkable, because he didn't just document these ancient practices as historical curiosities. He taught them to modern people with results that mirror the gospel accounts. Throughout his remarkable career, Edgar Cayce didn't present these revelations about Jesus' meditation practices as fascinating historical artifacts meant for academic study. Instead, he made a bold decision that would prove the timeless effectiveness of these ancient methods. He taught them directly to people living in 20th century America with results that were nothing short of extraordinary. The documented transformations read like modern-day versions of the gospel healing stories. Cayce worked extensively with individuals who were trapped in severe depression, battling chronic illnesses that baffled medical professionals, and struggling with the kind of spiritual emptiness that leaves people feeling disconnected from any sense of purpose or meaning. When he gave them detailed instructions for practicing Jesus' exact meditation techniques, the results consistently defied conventional expectations. One of the most compelling cases involved a woman from New York who had become completely bedridden with a mysterious illness that doctors couldn't diagnose or treat. Her condition had progressively worsened over months, leaving her family desperate for answers. When Cayce instructed her in Jesus' meditation method, focusing specifically on daily surrender of personal agenda and conscious attunement with divine consciousness, something remarkable began to unfold. The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it was steady and undeniable. Within 6 months of consistent practice, not only had her physical symptoms completely disappeared, but she began experiencing what Cayce called direct attunement with Christ consciousness. This wasn't just physical healing, it was a complete reconstruction of her relationship with life itself. Think about the implications here. The same meditation techniques that Jesus developed through 18 years of intensive training with ancient masters were producing measurable, documented results in modern Americans who committed to the practice. This wasn't placebo effect or wishful thinking. These were profound changes that transform people's health, relationships, and entire approach to living. The hidden truth that emerges from these documented cases is that Jesus' spiritual methods weren't limited by time, culture, or circumstance. They represent universal principles of consciousness transformation that work as effectively today as they did 2,000 years ago. The key factor wasn't having special abilities or divine favor. It was making the decision to practice consistently with genuine commitment. Behind the scenes of these healing stories, what becomes clear is that the same systematic approach Jesus used, daily surrender, conscious breathing, heart opening, and divine alignment, creates predictable results when applied with dedication and proper understanding. But Cayce's most advanced revelation about Jesus' meditation practice involved something called cosmic breathing, a technique so powerful that it expanded consciousness beyond individual boundaries to encompass planetary awareness itself. Cosmic breathing represented the pinnacle of Jesus' meditation mastery, and according to Cayce's revelations, this practice fundamentally transformed how consciousness itself operates. This wasn't ordinary breath awareness that most meditation practitioners understand today. Cosmic breathing involved something far more extraordinary, consciously breathing in universal love with each inhalation and breathing out that same love to all creation with each exhalation. The impact of this practice on Jesus' consciousness was beyond anything modern psychology can easily explain. Through systematic cosmic breathing, his awareness expanded to literally encompass the entire planet. Picture the mindset shift this represents, moving from personal, localized consciousness to planetary awareness, where every living being becomes part of your direct experience. This expansion created abilities that seemed miraculous, but were actually natural consequences of expanded consciousness. Through cosmic breathing meditation, Jesus developed what can only be described as instant spiritual diagnosis. When he encountered anyone, his expanded consciousness could immediately feel their pain, fear, and spiritual hunger. This wasn't psychic guesswork or intuitive speculation. It was direct, immediate knowing that emerged from his planetary-level awareness. Think about the behind-the-scenes reality this reveals about Jesus' ministry. Every healing, every profound teaching moment, every life-changing interaction was informed by this cosmic breathing practice that allowed him to perceive the exact spiritual condition of whoever stood before him. He could literally feel their inner struggles as if they were his own experience. Cayce provided remarkably specific instructions for this cosmic breathing technique that anyone can practice. The method involves sitting in meditation while establishing rhythmic breathing patterns, then consciously receiving God's infinite love with each inhalation and sending that love to all beings everywhere with each exhalation. The practice continues for 20 to 30 minutes daily, allowing the heart to gradually expand beyond personal boundaries. If this shifted something in your understanding, a like really helps this message find others who are ready for these deeper truths. The documented results from people who practiced this technique under Cayce's guidance were extraordinary and mirror What we know about Jesus' transformative presence: teachers reported spontaneous experiences of unconditional love for all their students, even the most challenging ones. Their classrooms transformed into spaces of healing and inspiration because their expanded consciousness created an atmosphere of universal love. Business leaders who adopted cosmic breathing found their companies becoming sources of positive transformation for employees and customers alike. Instead of operating purely from profit motives, they began making decisions based on what would serve the highest good of everyone involved. Their expanded awareness through cosmic breathing had fundamentally altered their decision-making process. But there's something even more profound about Jesus' ultimate meditation achievement that Cayce revealed, a practice he called conscious unity with the Father, which represents the complete merging of individual will with cosmic consciousness. The transformation stories emerging from Cayce's modern practitioners reveal just how profound Jesus' cosmic breathing technique really was. These weren't isolated cases or temporary improvements. They represented fundamental shifts in how consciousness operates in daily life. Teachers who committed to the practice found themselves responding to classroom challenges with a depth of patience and wisdom that surprised even them. The most disruptive students, the ones who had previously triggered frustration and exhaustion, suddenly became opportunities for expressing unconditional love. Behind the scenes of these educational transformations was something remarkable. The teacher's expanded consciousness was creating an energetic field that influenced everyone in the room. Students reported feeling more peaceful, focused, and motivated in these classrooms. The cosmic breathing practice had turned these educators into conduits for healing energy, just as Jesus had become through his daily meditation. The business world applications proved equally extraordinary. Corporate leaders who adopted cosmic breathing meditation discovered their decision-making process had fundamentally evolved. Instead of analyzing situations purely through profit margins and competitive advantage, they began accessing a deeper intelligence that considered the well-being of all stakeholders. Their companies became sources of positive transformation for employees, customers, and communities alike. What's fascinating is how these modern examples mirror exactly what Cayce revealed about Jesus' ultimate spiritual achievement: conscious unity with the Father. This wasn't a temporary mystical experience that came and went, but a permanent state of consciousness where individual will had become perfectly aligned with divine will. Every thought, word, and action flowed directly from cosmic consciousness rather than personal agenda. Think about the mindset required to achieve this level of surrender. Most people spend their lives strengthening their individual will, fighting to assert their personal desires and opinions. But Jesus had made the revolutionary decision to completely dissolve the barriers between his human consciousness and universal intelligence. The impact was so profound that witnesses described him as no longer operating from personal motivation at all. This explains the seemingly impossible statements Jesus made in the Gospels. When he declared, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't claiming exclusive divinity or supernatural status. He was describing the natural result of completely surrendering personal will to cosmic consciousness through 18 years of systematic meditation practice. The hidden truth that emerges from Cayce's revelations is that this same level of consciousness alignment is available to anyone willing to commit to the same practices Jesus used. The journey requires dedication, consistency, and genuine willingness to release personal control, but the Cayce's destination represents the ultimate human potential. Cayce's revelations about Jesus' daily dying practice represent perhaps the most radical spiritual technique ever documented. Each morning, before engaging with the world, Jesus would consciously release his personal identity and allow divine consciousness to take its place. This wasn't metaphorical language or poetic expression. It was a literal process of dying to his separate self and being reborn as an expression of universal love. The transformation this practice created was so complete that Jesus essentially lived each day from an entirely different operating system than ordinary human consciousness. His decisions, words, and actions flowed from cosmic intelligence rather than personal preferences or individual agenda. The impact on his effectiveness as a spiritual teacher becomes obvious when you understand this behind-the-scenes reality. This daily dying practice explains one of the most misunderstood statements in all of Christian history. When Jesus declared, "I and the Father are one," he wasn't making an exclusive claim to divinity that separated him from the rest of humanity. According to Cayce's readings, he was simply describing the natural result of surrendering personal will to cosmic consciousness through systematic daily meditation practice. Think about the revolutionary implications here. Jesus' most profound spiritual statements weren't declarations of his unique supernatural status, but descriptions of consciousness states that emerge naturally from specific practices. The hidden truth is that anyone willing to commit to the same daily dying and rebirth process can achieve the same level of divine alignment. This understanding completely transforms how we approach spiritual development. Cayce taught that the exact same level of Christ consciousness Jesus demonstrated is available to anyone willing to commit to his meditation practices. This wasn't reserved for one chosen individual or limited to a particular time period in history. It represents the ultimate potential of human consciousness when properly developed through systematic spiritual practice. The journey requires making the same fundamental decision Jesus made, choosing divine will over personal will, universal love over individual desires, cosmic consciousness over ego consciousness. But the destination isn't some distant, impossible goal. It's the natural result of consistent practice that gradually rewrites the basic programming of human awareness. Modern practitioners who have committed to these techniques report experiences that mirror the gospel accounts. Spontaneous healing abilities, prophetic insights, and profound states of unconditional love become natural expressions of consciousness aligned with divine will. The mindset shift from seeking personal advantage to serving universal good creates results that seem miraculous, but are actually inevitable consequences of expanded awareness. What makes this particularly relevant for our current time is how these individual transformations contribute to the collective spiritual awakening that Cayce predicted would emerge during the early decades of the 21st century. The documented transformations from people practicing Jesus' techniques reveal something extraordinary about human potential. Through consistent daily practice, individuals began receiving spontaneous insights about healing, not just for themselves, but for others in their lives. These weren't vague intuitions or wishful thinking. The insights proved so accurate and effective that many practitioners became known in their communities as gifted healers and spiritual counselors. What's fascinating is how this mirrors exactly what happened during Jesus' ministry. The same systematic meditation practices that developed his healing abilities were producing similar results in modern practitioners. The hidden truth becomes clear. These weren't supernatural gifts reserved for one individual, but natural consequences of consciousness expansion that anyone can achieve through dedicated practice. But Cayce revealed something even more revolutionary about how to approach this spiritual development. Instead of praying to Jesus as an external figure separate from ourselves, practitioners learned to recognize Christ consciousness as an inner reality that could be cultivated through daily meditation. This fundamental mindset shift transformed the entire spiritual journey from seeking something outside ourselves to awakening what already exists within. Think about the impact of this approach. Rather than feeling dependent on external divine intervention, practitioners discovered they could access the same consciousness that Jesus embodied by recognizing it as their own true nature. This internalized the divine relationship in ways that created genuine empowerment and spiritual independence. Cayce provided a specific affirmation technique that made this recognition practical and accessible. The practice begins each meditation session by affirming oneness with the Christ consciousness that was fully expressed in Jesus. Then, practitioners sit in complete silence, allowing this truth to penetrate every cell of their being. Gradually, the meditation becomes training in expressing divine love through their unique personality and circumstances. The beauty of this approach lies in how it honors both the universal nature of Christ consciousness and the individual expression it takes through each person. You're not trying to become Jesus or copy his personality. You're learning to express the same consciousness through your own authentic characteristics and life situation. Modern practitioners report that this affirmation technique creates profound shifts in how they experience themselves and interact with the world. The journey from intellectual understanding to embodied realization happens gradually but consistently as the daily practice rewrites fundamental patterns of identity and awareness. Behind the scenes of these transformations is a systematic process that democratizes spiritual enlightenment while maintaining respect for the profound commitment required to achieve it. The documented personal transformations from practicing Jesus's meditation techniques read like modern-day miracle stories. People consistently reported increased intuitive abilities that guided them through complex life decisions with remarkable accuracy. Spontaneous physical healing became commonplace, with chronic conditions simply dissolving as consciousness aligned with divine will. Perhaps most significantly, practitioners developed a profound peace that remained stable even during the most challenging circumstances. The impact extended into every area of life in ways that seemed almost too good to be true. Mothers discovered infinite patience with their children, accessing wells of compassion they never knew existed. Doctors found their diagnostic and healing abilities enhanced beyond their professional training, as if they were tapping into a deeper intelligence that could perceive the root causes of illness. Artists and writers began creating works that seemed to flow from a source beyond their personal minds, producing art that touched people's souls in transformative ways. But here's where Cayce's revelations become truly extraordinary. These individual transformations weren't isolated phenomena. They were early indicators of a massive spiritual awakening that he predicted would emerge during the early decades of the 21st century. According to his prophecies, we're living through what he called the return of the Christ consciousness. This isn't the second coming of Jesus as a physical person returning to earth. Instead, Cayce foresaw the activation of Christ consciousness within millions of individuals who would practice the same meditation techniques Jesus used. The hidden truth behind his prophecy is that humanity was destined to collectively rediscover its divine nature through systematic spiritual practice. Think about the profound implications here. As more people achieve the kind of divine alignment that Jesus demonstrated, their combined spiritual energy would trigger a planetary consciousness shift. This collective transformation would heal the artificial divisions between religions, nations, and races that have plagued humanity for centuries. Individual awakening becomes the catalyst for global healing. The behind-the-scenes reality of this prophecy is already becoming visible in our world today. The growing interest in meditation, consciousness studies, and spiritual healing practices across all cultures represents early evidence of this awakening. The proliferation of yoga studios, meditation apps, and spiritual wellness centers indicates that humanity is beginning to remember its true spiritual nature. What makes this moment particularly significant is how it aligns perfectly with the timeline Cayce established for this planetary transformation. We're not just witnessing random spiritual trends, we're experiencing the early stages of the most significant consciousness shift in human history. The signs of this awakening are everywhere once you know what to look for. The explosive growth in meditation apps downloaded by millions, the transformation of ancient yoga practices into mainstream wellness culture, and the proliferation of consciousness studies in universities worldwide all point to the same phenomenon. Humanity is instinctively seeking the spiritual practices that Jesus mastered, even without understanding the historical connections. Behind the scenes of this cultural shift is something deeper than mere trend following. People are experiencing an inner calling to reconnect with their true spiritual nature, exactly as Cayce predicted would happen during our current era. The decisions individuals are making to prioritize meditation, mindfulness, and spiritual healing reflect a collective remembering of humanity's divine potential. But recognizing the awakening is just the beginning. The real transformation happens when you make the decision to establish your own daily practice based on the exact techniques Jesus used. Cayce provided remarkably clear instructions that anyone can follow. Begin with just 15 minutes each morning in a quiet space, facing east if possible, to connect with the rising sun's energy. The practice starts with rhythmic breathing to quiet the mind and establish inner stillness. Then comes the crucial step, complete surrender of personal will, while asking for divine guidance to direct your day. The session ends by consciously sending love to all beings everywhere, expanding your consciousness beyond personal boundaries, just as Jesus did with his cosmic breathing practice. What's fascinating is how Cayce emphasized consistency over intensity in developing this in practice. Jesus himself practiced daily for 18 years before beginning his ministry, demonstrating that transformation happens gradually as divine consciousness slowly replaces ego consciousness as your primary identity. This isn't about having dramatic spiritual experiences or achieving instant enlightenment. It's about steady, patient rewiring of consciousness through systematic daily practice. The hidden truth that most spiritual seekers miss is that the journey requires the same kind of commitment Jesus demonstrated, not the dramatic sacrifice and suffering that traditional Christianity emphasizes, but the quiet discipline of showing up every morning to surrender personal will and align with divine intelligence. Modern practitioners who commit to this approach report that the changes begin subtly but become increasingly profound over time. The first few months bring greater emotional stability and clearer intuition. By the first year, many experience the spontaneous healing and expanded awareness that characterized Jesus' consciousness. The impact on daily life becomes unmistakable as your decision-making process shifts from ego-driven choices to divinely guided actions that serve the highest good of everyone involved. The timeline of transformation that emerges from documented cases reveals a remarkably consistent pattern of spiritual development. Within the first year of practicing Jesus' meditation techniques, people consistently report increased intuition that guides them through complex decisions with startling accuracy. Emotional stability becomes their new normal, replacing the reactive patterns that previously controlled their responses to challenging situations. Perhaps most significantly, they begin experiencing spontaneous moments of unconditional love that seem to arise from nowhere and transform their relationships. By the third year of consistent practice, something extraordinary happens. Practitioners begin having direct unity. Consciousness experiences that mirror Jesus' own descriptions of divine alignment. These aren't brief mystical moments or temporary peak experiences, they're sustained periods where personal identity dissolves into universal love and wisdom becomes the primary operating system. One particularly compelling case involves a businessman who had been practicing Jesus' techniques for several years. He reported that his meditation practice had become so deep that personal concerns would completely dissolve into universal love during his morning sessions. The impact on his professional life was remarkable. Business decisions began flowing from intuitive wisdom rather than personal ambition, resulting in unprecedented success that positively affected everyone involved. Think about the mindset shift this represents. Instead of strategizing based on competitive advantage or profit maximization, his expanded consciousness guided him toward choices that served the highest good of employees, customers, and community alike. The hidden truth revealed through his experience is that surrendering personal will actually enhances effectiveness rather than diminishing it. This brings us to perhaps the most important insight from all of Cayce's teachings about Jesus' meditation practice. Christ consciousness isn't something you achieve through belief or intellectual study alone. It's a state of being that emerges naturally when personal will is consistently surrendered to divine will. Through daily meditation practice, understanding the concepts intellectually is just the beginning. The transformation happens through embodied practice that rewrites consciousness at the cellular level. According to Cayce's prophecies, individuals who establish consistent meditation practices during our current era become way showers for others seeking Christ consciousness during this planetary transformation. Each person who commits to this journey contributes to humanity's collective spiritual awakening. Your individual practice ripples outward, affecting everyone in your sphere of influence and adding to the critical mass needed for global consciousness shift. The behind-the-scenes reality is that we're living through the most significant spiritual transformation in human history, and every sincere practitioner plays a crucial role in anchoring these higher consciousness frequencies on Earth. As we reach the end of this extraordinary journey through Edgar Cayce's revelations about Jesus' hidden meditation practices, I hope you're feeling the same sense of wonder and possibility that I experienced when I first discovered these teachings. The dying woman's vision in 1944 of Jesus meditating by the river, his body glowing with divine light, has taken us through 18 years of intensive spiritual training that transformed an ordinary young man into the Christ consciousness. What strikes me most about these revelations is how they make spiritual mastery accessible rather than mysterious. Jesus wasn't born with supernatural abilities. He developed them through the same systematic practices that are available to each of us today. The cosmic breathing, the daily dying to personal will, the conscious unity with divine consciousness. These aren't distant ideals, but practical techniques that modern practitioners are using to transform their lives right now. If you've made it this far with me, you're clearly someone who's serious about spiritual growth and understanding the deeper truths that can revolutionize how we live. That's exactly the kind of person I create content for, and I'd love to have you join our community here. Hit that subscribe button because there's so much more to explore together. From ancient wisdom traditions to modern consciousness research that validates what spiritual masters have known for millennia. For those of you who stayed with me through this entire revelation, leave a comment saying this message was meant for me, so I know you are here for the complete journey. It means a lot to know that these profound teachings are reaching people who are genuinely ready to apply them. And if this exploration of Jesus' true spiritual practices has opened new understanding for you, a simple like on the video helps this message reach others who are searching for the same deeper truths. Every engagement helps build the community of modern way showers that Cayce predicted would emerge during our time. There's a video right here that perfectly complements what we've discovered today about Jesus' meditation techniques. It explores how these same practices are being validated by cutting-edge neuroscience research. Click and continue with me over there, because the connection between ancient wisdom and modern science will absolutely fascinate you.